My name is Austin. I'm a 26-year-old male, and this story took place about a month ago. This occurred on a trip my fiancé and I were on. We had just moved down to Florida for a chance at better opportunities for myself from where I was living previously. However, my fiancé had to sacrifice a lot for this transition. So to help ease the stress, we decided to go on a weekend trip to Universal Orlando Resort and just have fun together. Now, we planned out everything ahead of time, and with the tickets being so much money, we opted to go for a cheaper hotel to bring the price down a bit, which was a huge mistake. We arrived at the hotel the day before we were supposed to visit the resort, and we immediately could see why it was so cheap. The sign said Quality Inn, but from the looks of it, it was previously a run-down hotel that the company had bought and slapped their name on it. The room was nothing special, and as soon as I sat on the bed, the frame broke. First clue as to just how bad this place was. We didn't spend too much time in the room as we planned to go to a movie that night, so we quickly dropped off our bags and left. By the time we got back, it was around 11 p.m. I was really tired, and I had a migraine. I quickly changed for bed and laid down, hoping I could just fall asleep, even though my head was throbbing. My fiancé did the same shortly after, and before long, we both drifted off. Before I continue, I'll explain the layout of the room briefly. As soon as you walk in, to the right are two beds, with a night table in between them, and to the left was a table and dresser where the TV sat. If you kept going straight, you would walk to the sink and bathroom area. It was a typical hotel room layout. My fiancée always needs to face the door when she sleeps, as it makes her feel more at ease. She was pressed against my chest, so it woke me the moment I felt her suddenly jolt up. She immediately tapped my shoulder before she whispered to me, "I hear someone at the door. I think they're trying to open it." I didn't hear anything, but the sound of her voice made me believe she wasn't making it up. We sat there listening for what felt like forever, but was probably only 10 seconds, before I heard something. It was the sound of someone trying to open the door with a key card. Before I even had a chance to speak, the door suddenly opened. However, my fiancé was smart and had put the door latch on before we went to bed. Through the crack in the door, I could see an eye looking right at us. I immediately jumped up from the bed and yelled, "Wrong room, buddy." The man then mumbled something unintelligible. Whoever it was, they seemed to be severely intoxicated, speaking in a language I couldn't understand. But what he did next didn't need words to explain it. He then tried to push the door open with his hands. I yelled at him again, but this time with more force, trying to scare him away. I'm not the most imposing guy. I am pretty well built for my height and size. So I thought, if anything, I could at least sound intimidating enough to scare him away. I was wrong. After I shouted at the man, he stopped pushing on the door for a brief moment before slamming his shoulder into it, trying to break it down. My fiancé let out a scream and yelled for me to stop the man from coming in. From what I could see through the door's crack, he was a hefty guy. He had to be at least 6'1", over 250 pounds. So there was no way I was going to be able to stop him by strength alone. I grabbed the car keys off the table and held them in my hand, with the keys between my fingers. I decided that if this man came into our room, I was going to swing until I couldn't anymore. I ran to the door and flung my body against it, throwing the man back just enough for the door to shut again. He immediately ran back to the door and threw his way into it, while screaming words that I couldn't understand. Next to the door was a window, where I finally caught a glimpse of the man, and it confirmed my predictions of his size compared to mine. I also saw a woman, who I could only assume was his wife, along with 2 kids by her side. I couldn't believe this guy was acting this way in front of his family. I was snapped back to reality by my fiancée screaming that she was going to call the cops. And suddenly, the man stopped, and I could see him ushering the woman and kids away into an SUV. Moments later, they were gone. I don't know where they went, but I told my fiancée to call the front desk anyways, to let them know what happened. Nobody answered, so I decided to go to the desk myself and speak to whoever was working the shift that night. "Lock the door. I'll be back." Once I walked into the lobby, a line was already forming, so I had to wait. After about 20 minutes, I was the second in line, when a lady approached the counter and spoke. My eyes darted to her when she started to speak, as the words she said not only sent a chill down my spine, but made every sense in my body become fully aware of my surroundings. "We just used this key card to get into the room, but there was already people in it." It was the wife of the man who had almost busted down my door. I immediately started to look around, and once I looked behind me and out the doors that opened into the lobby, I could see the same man standing there beside the SUV. I did not move, not wanting to draw attention to myself. I slowly turned my head back towards the desk and kept it that way. Eventually, the lady left with a new key card. It was then that I approached the desk. I explained what happened, and the lady behind the desk told me that it was her fault, as she had given those people the wrong key card by mistake. I was so angry that this woman just seemed to act as if what just happened to my fiancé and I wasn't anything to be concerned about. I told her to write down a note that I would be back in the morning to speak to the manager about leaving early and getting a refund, before storming back out and to my room, more pissed off than I cared to admit. My fiancé didn't want to stay there for the night, but it was already so late that we relented. Once morning hit, we packed our bags and made our way to the front desk, fully expecting the manager to be filled in on what happened. But once we got there, we found out that this was not the case. The manager knew nothing about what happened, and even said that he asked the woman working the night shift if anything happened that they should have been aware of, and she told him no. I was again more pissed off than I cared to admit, but the manager quickly gave us a refund and checked us out early while apologizing profusely. At that point, I just wanted to get my fiancé and myself the hell out of that place, so I just said thank you, signed the papers, and left. The rest of the trip was great, and we had an amazing time at the resort. I'm glad my fiancé had the awareness to put the latch on the door that night, because without it, that man could have simply walked right in. And even with his family standing right there, he acted like a deranged lunatic, and I was preparing to attack him if he managed to get inside. Something horrible could have happened that night over a misunderstanding. Always be aware of your surroundings, and never compromise when it comes to your personal safety. This story goes way back to 1998, when I was 16 years old. I was hanging out with a couple of friends of mine, who I will call Ben and Jake. It was a late summer evening on a Saturday, and I was sitting in my room listening to some 80s rock albums, as teenagers would normally do back then. After a while, I got bored and went outside to meet up with my friends. We ended up chilling in Ben's garage, drinking beer and smoking pot. I can't remember exactly how, but we wound up walking down this narrow path by the woods and towards the lake. I guess we got bored of sitting around and went out to go do something. So back in '98, there was this popular hangout spot for teenagers in my neighborhood. So we were hoping to see some other kids there, but when we arrived, we were met with nothing but the sound of crickets. Bummer. So we sat on the bench for a while and just talked for about 15 minutes. Then Jake got the idea to go to an abandoned 2-story boathouse that was by the lake. We had nothing better to do, so we agreed. We soon entered the boathouse and started to explore. I just sort of stood there while Jake and Ben were going around breaking shit. I felt very uncomfortable, and I couldn't quite shake the feeling that we were being watched. We went upstairs where there was an old wooden boat lying there with a fishing net over it. While checking it out, from downstairs we all heard the wooden door to the boathouse creak open, followed by heavy footsteps. We all froze in place and listened carefully. There was around a 5-second break when we heard a terrifying voice call out to us.
I know you're here. Come out, wherever you are.
The heavy footsteps started to walk towards the stairs as the old floorboards creaked and moaned. Jake went inside the wooden boat, and Ben and I followed. We put the fishing net over our heads and didn't move. The footsteps soon reached the top of the stairs.
I can hear you.
We were all as still as cadavers as we sat there and listened to this deranged person stumble around, looking for us. I contemplated a plan of escape without being caught, but there was just no way for the three of us to make it past him, and he was closing in on us. We were literally like sitting ducks. The man moved out of sight when he entered a small room adjacent to the boat. We suddenly ripped off the fishing net and made a break for it.
There you are,
the man said as he emerged from the room and rushed at Jake. But Jake reacted very quickly and shoved the man, sending him toppling over. We all ran like hell out of there and through the tall grass into the woods. We heard the man give chase, but he eventually gave up. We all went back to Ben's garage and fell onto the couch in exhaustion. Jake then told us that he saw a knife in the man's hand as he fell over. Ben and I sat there in utter shock. Did that fucking maniac really plan on killing us in that old boathouse? To this day, I can't help but wonder, what would have happened to us if Jake hadn't reacted so quickly? This story took place many years ago. I grew up in a pretty small neighborhood, and I pretty much knew everyone who lived around me. Our house was at the very end of the street. At the other end was a popular park that everyone, especially children, went to. My sister loved to go on walks very late at night and would usually go to the swing set at the park and swing there for a while because nobody else would be around to bother her. The park layout had the playground next to a path that led into a wooded area, with the only light source coming from a building next to the swing set. One night, maybe around 1 or 2 a.m., my sister walked down to the park. She was swinging for maybe about 10 minutes when she felt something was wrong. It was that unmistakable feeling you get when you feel like you're being watched. She didn't think much of it until this random guy seemed to come out of nowhere and sat on the swing next to her. This stranger kept trying to make conversation. He kept asking her if she lived around the park and how old she was. Around this time, my sister was 18 or 19 years old and was fairly small, and she looked a lot younger for her age. She didn't want to be around the swings anymore, so she texted me, telling me to call her. I was very confused, but I could just tell that something was wrong. I called her, and she picked up very quickly. I asked her what was going on. "Oh, you need me home? I'll be there right away." This further confused me. I could then hear her telling someone that she had to go. As soon as she walked far enough away, she explained everything to me. She walked up the concrete steps that led into the parking lot, and before she crossed the street, she looked back, and to her absolute horror, She noticed 3 other figures had emerged out of the woods. Each seemed to be carrying some sort of weapon. She immediately turned back and ran home, turning a 2-minute walk into 30 seconds. She slammed the door shut and locked it immediately as soon as she got back. My sister doesn't scare easy, but this was one of the only times I had ever seen her truly frightened. I don't like thinking about what would have happened if she didn't leave that situation when she did. She was mere seconds away from being ambushed. After that night, she no longer went on her late walks to the park and now always carries a pocket knife for her protection. Hey everyone, thank you for tuning into this episode of Based on True Events. If you enjoyed these narrations and would like your story to be featured in this series, please send in your written experience to unit522stories@outlook.com. I look forward to hearing from you. Until next time, I'm your Uncle Unit, and as always, never forget, there's